I just had a interesting conversation with my wife, and I'd like to share it with you. Well, I think it was interesting anyway. It's up to you to decide. I just come back from my local gym, and it's Anzac Day in 2025, and I was just saying to her, "Oh, very busy in the gym today. I imagine people are quite enthused after feeling patriotic about remembering their lost forefathers who died today 110 years ago for us." In our way of life, and maybe they got this burst of energy, so they wanted to go to the gym to burn off some steam and to feel good about themselves with their dopamine rush from exercise. And she was like, "No, I just think it's because they have nowhere to go. Like most people just go to work, go home, and go to the gym." And I somewhat agreed and said, "Yeah, well, that's what happens when you get pushed out of the city." And she's quite tired; she didn't really understand, but I started to discuss how in a lot of countries, particularly in China and India, there is no, or even in Ukraine, where she's from, there is no minimum wage. And so you can charge whatever you want for a small business. You can pay staff $5, $10 a day. And so it's much easier to come to Australia that has a country with minimum wage, looking out for people with morals, and you come from a place that does not. Because then you have extra money because you've lived a life that doesn't go by our sense of morality, which gives you an upper hand in terms of business, but a lower hand in terms of righteousness. And so they're able to live in the city where it's more expensive, and also older people who purchased a house before the boom. And so where we live, an hour south of Melbourne, it's good to have a farm. Like, the intention of living so far from the city and amenities, the cosmopolitan aspects, being close to your neighbors, and having all the attractions of the beautiful buildings and art galleries, and stand-up comedy and music, classical music concerts, and going for a nice tavern meal, playing a game of pool with your brothers. But that's been pushed away because of things like mass migration, as I was saying. And not to mention, where I live would be fine if you had a farm, but if you're just in suburbia, it's not ideal because you've got two situations. You're far from the amenities of the city, but you don't have the attractions of nature. So you can still go for a walk, which I do every day, but you don't have the beautiful animals and the joy of working on your own home and toiling the soil and doing things like riding dirt bikes around your property. And so, yes, she's right to an extent that perhaps people are at the gym in large numbers because of the fact that they are priced out of other activities. Yes, there's many things you can do that don't cost much money, but also, like on a public holiday, and if you don't have many children, or because obviously Melbourne is famously a transient place. A lot of people have moved here from interstate, looking for more of a cutting edge, more of a cosmopolitan feel, because Melbourne is notoriously known for entrepreneurial endeavors. It's known for incredible architecture, where the buildings themselves can have healing properties, Tartarian structures. Also, there's a big emphasis on high quality foods and cuisines. And so it just, that was the extent of the conversation. And there was an element of understanding as I explained what I meant by being pushed out of the city. She was like, "Yeah, but you said everyone has the right to move out of the country, so they don't have to stay in their own country." And I said, "Well, yes, I agree to an extent, but there has to be a line." Like my auntie, she's from Newcastle in England, as my mother is. And my auntie wasn't allowed to migrate here. She had a high-end corporate job. Very lovely woman, no criminal record, beautiful soul. She tried many, many times profusely to migrate here. She wasn't allowed to. as a white Caucasian woman, even though Australia was settled and built upon part of the British Empire. And it would have been more difficult for her to move here because she couldn't pay the fees because she came from a fellow nation that has rules in terms of minimum wage. So obviously, if someone comes from India or China, they can open up a business, pay peanuts, save money quickly, come to Australia. Their dollars are worth more because they come from a place where they didn't have minimum wage. And so do you see how there's a little bit of unfairness there? And there is a few select politicians and people who have exorbitant amount of properties who benefit from that because there's a shortage of value or a shortage of housing, and they can charge more in terms of rent, and they can get a second loan on their house, which is being valued as worth more because of the demand. So there is a select few people who do benefit from having this stranglehold on accommodation due to mass migration.